At the outset of my professional career, I was a driven young executive striving to succeed in the banking industry. Having recently graduated from college, I rapidly advanced in my role, garnering respect from my colleagues. My dedication and efforts were duly rewarded with a substantial promotion and a substantial bonus. Life appeared ideal, with a promising career, supportive colleagues, and a romantic engagement with a woman named Georgia. We were planning our wedding and everything seemed to be falling into place. However, my job demanded long hours and I observed subtle changes in Georgia's behavior. She, who had previously been affectionate and attentive, now seemed distant. I attributed this shift in behavior to despite my efforts to reconnect, the unease lingered. The distance between us continued to grow, prompting me to question the stability of our relationship. One evening, while at a friend's house, I checked my phone and connected to my apartment's security cameras after hearing strange noises. To my shock, I saw Georgia with my best man and another groomsman. These were the same friends who had just celebrated with me on a trip to the Gold Coast. We had spent the weekend enjoying the races, a casino, and lounging by the pool. On Sunday, we were asked to leave our hotel due to a noise complaint and discovered pills in our room. We were unable to find new accommodations, so we took a red-eye flight back to Sydney. My remaining friends insisted we continue the celebration at Tony's house despite feeling nauseous from all the drinking. I agreed out of appreciation for their effort. Georgia was at her bachelorette party in Sydney and I was not surprised when my call went to voicemail. Georgia had moved in with me 2 months ago after her lease ended. I had recently purchased a two-bedroom was located in the penthouse, which made it convenient for her to move in. Despite her parents being strict Catholics, they were supportive of our upcoming wedding at Tony's house. My friends soon fell asleep and I retired to a bedroom to rest. I was suddenly alerted to a text message from my downstairs neighbor, who was complaining about noise. I replied to clarify the misunderstanding, but I only received another message accusing me of causing a disturbance with Georgia. I was shocked to realize that something was seriously wrong. I was perplexed. He appeared to be certain that he had the correct number. What was occurring? Fortunately, I had a method of determining the truth without leaving the penthouse. The previous tenant had installed remote access cameras in the renovated apartment, which had been purchased from a billionaire father who was overprotective of his daughter. The agent had set up the system on my phone, which I had only used a couple of times previously. However, it was now essential for me to ascertain the truth. I logged in and selected the camera in the living room, which revealed beer bottles, wine glasses, a bong, and a bag of pills on the coffee table. The camera revealed no individuals, but clothing was scattered around. Hearing noise elsewhere, I switched to the bedroom camera. Moonlight revealed a tangle of bodies on my bed. I recognized the voices, they were my fiancé and friends. I experienced a sense of betrayal, a combination of rage and disbelief. I recognized the need for a plan of revenge. Upon reviewing the recordings, I observed that the hard drive held 24 hours of footage. The video quality was poor due to inadequate lighting, but the conversations were incriminating. Georgia and the men discussed the forthcoming wedding with Tom, boasting of a plan to distract me while they engaged in their own activities. Georgia mentioned the lack of birth control, suggesting that we engage in activities such as playing Russian roulette with our future children. I disconnected from the system, as I was unable to tolerate this information. The hard drive continued to record in a hidden closet, preventing me from sleeping. I proceeded to the living room, where Tony and Jeff were snoring. I resisted the urge to strike Tony, who grabbed a beer and began to leaf through an old newspaper. I observed that a headline warned against drinking. The text then proceeded to mention a group targeting intoxicated women, which prompted the formation of a plan. My phone buzzed again, indicating that my neighbor had filed a noise complaint with the police. I considered this an ideal opportunity to set my plan in motion. "You've reached New South Wales Police. How can we help?" the dispatcher inquired. "There is an emergency. My fiancé might be in trouble." "I need to get into my apartment," I replied in a state of distress. "Please calm down, sir. Can you provide some details?" the dispatcher responded. I demanded an explanation for the situation, stating, "Why do you believe this is occurring?" The dispatcher inquired, "Can you remain calm?" My neighbor had filed a complaint regarding the noise, but I was not present at the scene. I requested assistance, stating, "Please send someone." The dispatcher asked, "How did you learn of the noise complaint?" I explained that the neighbor had sent me a message indicating that he had filed a noise complaint. I emphasized the urgency of the situation, stating, "I'm begging you." The dispatcher requested my address and I provided it. After a brief interval, she instructed, "I'm transferring you." Another 30 seconds elapsed before a male voice came on the line. "This is Staff Sergeant Potts from the Sex Crimes Unit," he said. "I'm calling to inform you that something terrible is happening." He asked, "Is there any chance it's someone else or that she has someone there?" Sergeant Potts inquired. I feigned distress and my whimpering did not help. I then attempted to project anger, but it was ineffective. "The wedding is scheduled to take place in 3 weeks. If this delay causes her any inconvenience, I will pursue legal action against you and the department. I will make my concerns public through various media outlets, including television and print publications. Please calm down, sir. We will investigate the matter further. Could you please provide us with your fiancée's name and the nature of her activities this evening?" Sergeant Potts attempted to pacify me by asking for the details of my fiancée's whereabouts. I informed him that she had gone to a bachelorette party in King's Cross. Sergeant Potts then requested the number I was calling from. He explained that it was necessary for them to have a reliable contact number to keep me informed. I provided the number and Sergeant Potts assured me that they would contact me as soon as they had any updates. I proceeded to the location as well. I inquired persistently, still in a state of distress. The officer instructed me to remain where I was until he could contact me again. However, the situation did not unfold as I had hoped. I had intended for the officers to enter the premises without delay. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text message from my neighbor. The message read, "Sorry dude. I thought it was you. The police are on their way up with weapons and helmets. I hope George is okay. I'm praying for you both." I logged back into the security system and switched to the camera in the living room. However, I did not see anything out of the ordinary. 3 minutes later, the door opened slowly. 2 officers, clad in bulletproof vests and armed with pistols, entered, signaled, and 4 more followed. I switched to the bedroom camera, where chaos had erupted. The police stormed in, yelling, "Armed police, get down." Tom and Carl were quickly handcuffed. "What the hell is this?" Tom shouted. "That'll be the last girl you see for a while," an officer roared. Carl added, "They dragged the guys out." A policewoman wrapped a blanket around. Georgia was reassured by the sergeant that she was safe and that her fiancé would be contacted to meet them at the hospital. Georgia inquired, her voice still somewhat confused, whether she would like her mother to be present during the examination. The policewoman informed her that the hospital had a highly skilled team for survivors and encouraged her to take her time, reassuring her that the paramedics would be arriving shortly. The policewoman suggested that Georgia either lie or admit that the sexual encounter was consensual, thereby revealing her true character. It was evident that she was engaged, as evidenced by the fact that she was wearing her engagement ring. I proceeded to switch cameras to check on Tom and Carl. They were still seated in their underwear as a police officer questioned them about the pills. Despite being asked direct questions, they remained silent. It appeared that Georgia had crossed the line from mere possession to dealing drugs, which carried a minimum sentence of 3 years. She was given the option of assisting the police in return for a lighter sentence. However, she chose to remain silent. The police officer ordered the officers to take the boys to the station. Another officer gestured for them to follow. The woman then emerged and they conversed quietly for a brief period. The man then proceeded to call my phone, which was ringing. "Hello." I responded, attempting to sound as anxious as possible. "This is Staff Sergeant Potts," he said. "What happened? Have you found Georgia? Is she okay?" I proceeded to bombard him with questions, attempting to ascertain the situation. "Calm down, Mr. Spencer. We have found your fiancée and transported her to the hospital." Sergeant Potts replied, "Is she all right?" I inquired urgently, "Yes. This is just a precaution. We will be at St. Vincent." Stated that he would call me when he arrived and provide further details. He then terminated the call before I could request additional information. I procured a taxi and departed from Tony's residence. I was uncertain about how the police would respond to this situation and whether they would believe George's account or those of Tom and Carl. I needed to remain vigilant to navigate this situation at the hospital. A constable met me and led me to a side room. Inside, I observed a tall, thin man with a hooked nose on the phone. The constable informed him of my presence, after which the man ended his call and approached. The man extended his hand and I shook it. "Adam Spencer," he said, "where is my fiancée?" "She's with the doctor," I replied. "You'll see her soon, but I need to speak with you first." He pointed to a chair and we sat down. "Your fiancée, Georgia, was detained by the police," he began. "She's being questioned now." "Is that necessary?" I interrupted, irritated. "Yes, her welfare is our priority." He stated this firmly. "I want to see her." I muttered. "You will," he replied. "But first, where were you tonight?" he asked. "Why does it matter?" I retorted. "If you were home, Georgia wouldn't be here." He pointed out that I was at a friend's house. We returned late from Brisbane and one of my friends insisted I stay over. I explained where. "That's not what I asked," he replied. "When did your neighbor contact you about the noise?" he continued. "I'll check my phone," I replied. 11. The time was 45 p.m. It was 11:45 p.m. I responded, consulting my phone. "I would like to show you some pictures. Could you please tell me if you recognize these men? Is this standard procedure?" I inquired, with a note of skepticism. "It's just a hunch," he replied. "These two look like office workers, not criminals." He proceeded to show me pictures. I feigned shock and anger. "Why do you have pictures of Tom and Carl?" I demanded. He demanded to know who they were. He inquired as to whether Tom was his best man and Carl was one of his groomsmen. He then asked why they were in his apartment. I was bewildered by this line of questioning. He then asked why they were not at the party. I informed him that they had left Brisbane early, stating that they had work. I slumped in my chair, attempting to appear dejected. A voice from the policewoman from my apartment, whom I had previously identified as Sergeant Potts, requested a brief conversation in the hallway outside my room. I excused myself from the ongoing discussion with my fiancée and proceeded to the hallway. Sergeant Potts and another officer, whom I did not recognize, began speaking in hushed tones. After a brief exchange, both officers departed. I returned to my fiancé and apologized for the interruption. I informed him that the police had some questions for him and requested that he accompany me to the hallway. I listened to the remainder of the conversation, during which the officers inquired about the whereabouts of two individuals who had been present in my apartment earlier that day. I informed them that the individuals had left the premises and provided them with the relevant details. I have drafted a statement, but she has not yet signed it. The policewoman inquired as to my thoughts on the matter. It seems peculiar that she engaged in an extramarital affair, yet the issue of consent does not appear to be the primary concern. Her narrative seems contrived, as though it were a script for a television program. Perhaps she was engaged in one final romantic encounter before the wedding. I concur, the other individuals involved do not appear to be connected to the crime. Her boyfriend seems Potts was visibly shaken. He noted that they were at an impasse and that he was unsure of the best course of action. He suggested that Letton read George's statement to refresh his memory of the pertinent details. He also advised that they should remind her of the perjury penalties. He inquired as to the extent to which he could push her. He replied that he should just be enough to scare her and get the truth. Potts instructed Letton to go see her. They left the room. I paused the recording, pondering George's potential response. It was time to initiate my plan of retribution. I contacted a contact, Eric Town, who wrote for the business section in a gossip column called CBD. I had met him at a fundraiser and we had established a rapport. "Good morning, Eric," I greeted him. "Good morning, Adam," he replied. "What is going on at this hour?" I inquired. "I have a story for you," he said, sounding surprised. "Have you completed your column for tomorrow?" I inquired. "I have just finished it. There's been a lull in activity." Do you have any recent information? The column included a section called Guess Who, which featured unnamed gossip. It was a popular feature among city office workers, including Tom and Carl. I inquired about the attendees of the wedding, specifically asking who had attacked Eric. Eric responded, "Your best man and groomsmen." I then asked if he was my former fiancé. I was visibly upset. Eric paused and I continued, "I'm not really surprised." He asked, "What does that mean?" I raised my voice, earning a stern look from a nurse who was present. A nurse who was passing by overheard the conversation and became aware of the rumors about Georgia and her boss. She wondered if Georgia had been offered as an incentive for clients. Eric expressed his frustration, asking how he had been so blind to the situation. He muttered, "It's called love." Adam then asked if he should run the story. Eric replied, "Yes, burn them." He hung up and a policewoman approached. She introduced herself as Constable Haven and asked if she could talk to Georgia. She informed me that she would be arriving shortly and expressed a desire to assist me. I acknowledged her offer, though I was reluctant to divulge the specifics of my situation. Georgia arrived with Sergeant Potts. I feigned concern for her well-being while formulating a plan of action. I had 3 members of my wedding party in trouble, but there were still 2 more to consider. The officers provided me with their contact information and we parted ways. On the return journey, Georgia expressed her gratitude and affection, declaring her love for me at our apartment. I proceeded to tidy up, but Georgia urged me to lie with her in bed. I informed her that I needed to consult with the doctor first. Georgia urged me to hurry, but I explained that I would be there shortly. Eventually, Georgia retired to bed. I downloaded and viewed the video from my hard drive, where I discovered that there was no evidence of mistreatment. Georgia and the other men discussed pills and business deals. It was sufficient for possession with intent to distribute. I planned to send the footage to the police at noon but decided to call now to demonstrate that I was not concealing anything. I dialed Sergeant Pott, surprised when he answered. "Hello, Sergeant Pott," he said. His tone indicated annoyance. I hoped I had not woken him. "It's Adam," I said. "Spencer, I encountered you at the hospital when I retrieved my fiancée. Might I inquire as to whether I disturbed your repose?" I responded in the negative, noting that I am on the night shift and do not retire until 8 a.m. Your demeanor remained somewhat disgruntled. I am not inclined to consume a considerable amount of your time, but I paused for effect. There are 3 security cameras in my apartment, connected to a hard drive. I emitted a snort and cleared my throat. Might I inquire as to why you did not mention this previously? Earlier, I inquired as to whether you had viewed the footage. I am curious as to whether you were similarly intrigued by the events that transpired. I neglected to mention that I had viewed the footage and ceased feigning emotional distress. Could you elaborate on what you observed? Adam, are you there? He inquired. I am uncertain as to whether the incident constituted maltreatment. They entered the premises in a jovial and affectionate manner. I emitted a stifled exclamation and he requested to view the pills. I observed them placing the pills on the coffee table. I admitted that I needed the video footage in question. 2 attorneys have threatened legal action. Could you please send it? He requested. I replied that I would send it via email and asked for the address. He provided it and then terminated the call. I sent all the footage from the 3 cameras. I then attempted to sleep, but was unable to do so until approximately 5 p.m. The phone rang. Sergeant Pott sounded much. I was in bed but unable to sleep. I responded curtly, "I'm not currently available for a meeting. Perhaps we could have coffee at 8 a.m. "I have no plans," I replied, my tone indicating frustration. "There's a coffee shop in Sir Hills near the Oxford Tavern." "Do you know it?" he inquired. "I'll see you at 8:08, I confirmed. I attempted to sleep but was unable to do so until 7 a.m. I proceeded to shower, and Georgia was still asleep or feigning sleep. I attempted to occupy my mind with the morning news, but a story captured my attention. Law enforcement had conducted a pre-dawn raid in Bronte. 2 men were arrested for their involvement in a pill trafficking ring. My neighbors described the suspect as a pleasant young man who worked at a local bank. In Bronte, a dawn raid resulted in the arrest of 2 men involved in a pill trafficking ring. Neighbors described the occupant as a pleasant young man who worked at a bank. As of yet, the police have not released any details. I had prepared to meet with the sergeant, but then I remembered my conversation with the gossip columnist. I checked the online supplement of the CBI column, which included a list of names. I saw that Guess Who was not among them. The profile of PR and socialite is postponing her wedding after being caught in a compromising situation with 2 newlyweds. Her former fiancé, a rising star in private banking, was not among them. The city would be abuzz with speculation. I suddenly thought of George's parents. They deserved to hear the news firsthand. I called them immediately. Jack, George's father, answered. "Hello, Adam. How are you? How is the Buck weekend going?" Jack inquired as to whether the event had concluded prematurely due to a dispute in Brisbane. I requested an in-person meeting with him in the morning. Adam, his voice quivering, replied that he was reluctant to discuss the matter via telephone. Jack, a retired individual from the city, perused the business section of the newspaper each morning. I suggested that he explain the situation in person. Could he come to the city? He replied that he would be there around 11 a.m. Where would you prefer to convene? He inquired. I believe that pastry shop by your former office still offers the most palatable treats. Very well, we will meet there. However, I urge you to refrain from making any hasty decisions until you are fully informed. I am already aware of the situation, Jack. I am sorry. After bidding farewell, I stepped outside. It was a splendid day in Sydney, with clear skies and sunshine. Late fall is always the optimal time for a walk. The sun is not too harsh and the humidity is lower. I decided to walk to the meeting, arriving a bit late. Sergeant Potts was about to leave when I entered the cafe. I thought bankers were punctual. He said he was still on vacation. I replied grumpily as I sat down. He smiled and informed me that the CCTV footage was very informative and gave them enough to work with. We proceeded to separate the 2 individuals and inquired about the pills. They both assumed the other had sold them. The waitress brought my orange juice and his warm milk. The police officer commented that his approach had changed. He was drinking his milk. We obtained Tony's name and searched his house, finding more. The Narcotics Division is pleased that Tony is attempting to negotiate a plea deal by providing information about his supplier. What happens next? I inquired. The bail hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, and Tony may also be present if he accepts a plea deal. I inquired as to whether a public hearing would be more appropriate. He suggested that I might obtain access and a time map if I were to obtain a warrant. He then posited that the hard drive might have become corrupted by then. I responded that I was not after him and that I was merely interested in learning what he wanted to happen to Georgia. He then asked what I meant. I replied that she could be charged with perjury, but that it might be dismissed as a first offense or that we could simply forget it. Unless you desire retribution, which seems probable, he waved the document. I am uncertain of your meaning. I feigned ignorance. Please contact me after 6 p.m. if you wish me to pursue charges, or I will refrain from doing so. He then departed. I finished my juice and proceeded into the bright sunlight, heading toward the city. The subsequent phase of my revenge was to arrive at work appearing disheveled and despondent. This would incite further. As I entered the bank lobby, I observed that the guards were engaged in a heated exchange. This continued as I proceeded towards the elevators. I boarded the first elevator, which was subsequently joined by several others. At this point, the mailman entered the elevator, prompting Adam to inquire about his weekend. The secretary feigned a loss of balance and proceeded to strike the cart into the mailman. He was particularly cautious, as though he were nursing an injury to his shins. The other occupants of the elevator were silent, their gazes fixed on the floor. I proceeded to the top floor, intending to seek out the CEO's office. However, only the receptionist remained, who had effectively silenced the mailman. She placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm sorry about what happened. If you need to talk, here's my number." She then handed me a slip of paper and walked away. I discarded the note in the trash. I surmised that she had a considerable number of such notes. I proceeded to the CEO's office. His secretary, a formidable woman, regarded me over her glasses. "Adam, what are you doing here?" "You have 2 more days off," she said. I was struck by her demeanor, which I perceived to be particularly solicitous. I inquired as to whether I might see Mr. Turnbull for a brief moment. She regarded me with sympathy. "He's taking a break between calls," she said. "I'll check if he can see you." She rose from her chair, knocked on the door, and peeked inside. Upon entering, she returned with a smile and informed me that Mr. Turnbull would be available shortly. She then instructed me to take a seat. I did so, and she proceeded to resume her own work. It appeared that she had been about to speak, but then seemed to hesitate. Finally, she spoke, stating that I had been abandoned at the altar. She then regretted her comment. Mr. Turnbull soon appeared and invited me in. He was a tall man with grey and curly hair, known for his lunchtime jogs. He gestured for me to enter. "Tom, I wasn't anticipating your arrival, particularly given the circumstances. It would be preferable if you could provide us with a detailed account of what transpired." He appeared somewhat uneasy, which was unusual for him. "I came to request a leave of absence due to personal issues involving other employees at the PR firm. It is imperative that you are made aware of the situation." "Please do." I returned from a retreat at a friend's residence earlier than anticipated. I received a text message from my neighbor indicating that there was a disturbance in my apartment, which I initially assumed was a break-in. Upon calling the police, they discovered pills in my fiancé's possession, along with those of Tom and Carl. I took a moment to collect myself, using a handkerchief. "Oh dear, oh dear," Mr. Turnbull muttered, leaning forward. "Tom, Carl, and Tony are currently in custody." I continued, "This is unfortunate for the firm." "What did Georgia say?" he inquired. "I haven't spoken to her since I spoke with." I informed him that the police had been called. I then expressed my concern that the 2 individuals in question would not be returning to the premises. He advised me to take as much time as I needed and to contact him on Monday to discuss the matter further. Upon my departure, I inquired about the status of the PR firm. He appeared uneasy, and I sensed that there might be more to the situation than met the eye. I surmised that an internal investigation would likely be conducted, given that Tom and Carl were responsible for managing the tender. The process will be discussed with Jeremy, the CEO. His reaction made me suspicious. I was reminded of what Eric had told me about George's role and Tom and Carl's comments. This made me realize that Mr. Turnbull might be involved. I needed a more comprehensive plan to achieve full revenge. I took a cab to the bakery to meet George's parents. I arrived early and ordered. I observed Georgia in the kitchen, engaged in a frantic exchange via text message. She then permitted an individual to enter the premises, whom I subsequently identified as Jeff. Georgia attempted to initiate a kiss, but Jeff evaded the gesture. The pair proceeded to the living room, where Georgia adopted an assertive posture while Jeff maintained a distance. Eventually, they relocated to a sofa in the lounge, with Jeff positioned opposite Georgia. I was unable to discern the content of their interaction due to the public setting. I was unable to overhear their conversation. She then threw herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. I glanced around to ensure her parents hadn't arrived yet. When I looked back, the scene had subtly changed. There was a knock on the window, and George's father waved, heading for the door. Jack made his way to the door. I proceeded to the table, where I shook his hand and then sat down. I informed him that his wife was not accompanying him. I had read the CBD column and deemed it preferable to come alone. Janice has high blood pressure, so I left her at home. Jack indicated that I should have coffee, and I agreed. He then stated that the slanderous column was accurate, although it was also defamatory. Sue him. Jack suggested that suing would be an expensive and ultimately unsuccessful endeavor, given the veracity of the claim. He then inquired about the circumstances surrounding the claim, prompting a response indicating that the waitress had brought coffee and that Jack was waiting for her to leave. He then asked about the veracity of the claim, citing a previous incident where the police had entered his apartment after receiving a noise complaint and discovered Tom and Carl with Georgia in their bed. He then suggested that they must have. Jack was insistent that she had been forced. Initially, they believed this to be the case, but it subsequently became apparent that this was not the truth. I stated that this was implausible, given that my daughter would never engage in such behavior. Jack was visibly distressed. I informed him that the evidence in the form of photographs was irrefutable and that the wedding was therefore no longer a possibility. He was unwilling to accept this, stating that people often create images that do not reflect reality. I was firm in my stance and did not allow myself to be swayed by his denial. I was reluctant to offend him, yet I was also reluctant to be the one who took the blame. I accessed the live security feed on my phone, but it was inconclusive. It was likely staged with an actress. He then placed my phone face down, stating, "This is a live feed. It's happening right now." I was taken aback by his response and questioned his sanity. Jack's fantasies intensified when I informed Georgia of his actions. He began to rise from his seat, but I commanded him to sit down. He complied, but his demeanor indicated a sense of unease. I then demanded his phone, which he handed over reluctantly. I called Georgia's number, and my phone screen showed her reaching for her phone. Jack slumped, his appearance suggesting advanced age and frailty. I expressed regret for his actions, noting that he should have been aware of their implications. The wedding is no longer a possibility. Neither you nor Janice are deserving of this outcome, yet I am unable to proceed with the ceremony. Jack nodded, his eyes red with tears. Have you informed her of the situation? No, she was asleep when I left to meet the police. I replied, it is unfortunate that she is unaware of the circumstances. It seems she has once again become involved with that individual. Jack said, it is not the same person. Let us go outside and take a walk. I proposed that we depart from the coffee shop and proceed to the park, where we engaged in discourse on a multitude of topics, yet avoided any mention of Georgia. Jack eventually expressed a desire to return home, and we proceeded on foot to the cab. Will you inform her? Jack inquired, when we had a moment of respite. When you have a moment of respite, I replied, my voice betraying a hint of bitterness. Jack turned away, and I was overcome with a sense of foreboding. Jack, part of me still loves her, I said, my voice laden with emotion. Jack, part of me thinks this is a. It is a nightmare, but the remainder of my being desires to annihilate her and the men who have touched her. I confessed, let me know before you do. I will come to get her. A father cannot cease loving his daughter. Jack said softly, sure. Jack, I replied, I will let you know. We shook hands awkwardly, and he entered a cab. I located a tranquil area in the park and reviewed the CCTV footage. The footage revealed that Georgia was in her robe and Jeff was tying his shoes. Jeff, who was engaged to one of the wealthiest women in Australia, was engaging in foolish behavior. Penny Rell, daughter of Jackie Rell, was part of a wealthy family despite her lack of physical beauty. She was a commendable individual and in love with Jeff. My father used to say, you can marry more in 5 minutes than you can earn in a lifetime. Jeff was employed by Penny's family company, which meant that his position would be jeopardized if she were to view the surveillance tapes. I had devised a plan of revenge, although I had not yet considered my superior. However, I had a contingency plan for him as well. The final step was to gain Georgia's cooperation. I had a strategy in place to ensure that Georgia would meet my needs. I was curious to see how Georgia would. Upon my return home, I discovered that she had departed, postponing the confrontation and affording me the opportunity to devise a strategy. Jeff's interaction with Georgia had revealed that she had been dispatched by Carl and Tom's legal counsel to ascertain the information she had conveyed to the authorities. I contemplated the possibility of filing a charge of witness tampering, but anticipated that Penny would likely impose a more severe penalty by 5 o'clock. The time was 10 p.m. I was preparing dinner when Georgia and her bridesmaid, Shelley, arrived. They observed me in the kitchen and approached Georgia, extending their arms to embrace me. Adam, how are you? She inquired, her voice trembling as if she were holding back tears. I did not reciprocate the embrace. I informed her that I had been in communication with the police, my employer, and her father. Georgia's demeanor shifted, but she managed to maintain her composure. Shelley proceeded to elaborate on how they had drugged my beverages at the bachelorette celebration, resulting in my ejection from the establishment. Furthermore, she revealed how Tom and Carl had exploited Georgia. She attempted to embrace me once more, but I evaded her grasp. "Is that what transpired, Shelley?" I inquired, employing a sarcastic tone. "Yes," she replied, exactly as Georgia stated. It was merely a brief, indiscreet act that spiraled out of control. Shelley was visibly taken aback by my assertions. Georgia appeared distraught, attempting to intervene. However, Shelley abruptly repelled her, exclaiming, "You're on your own now." Georgia sought to de-escalate the situation, but Shelley was adamant. "I was aware of your proclivities for revelry," she retorted, "but I had not anticipated such a flagrant display of promiscuity." Before slamming the door, Georgia turned back to me, sobbing. She mumbled apologies, claiming that if I had stayed with her, it wouldn't have happened. I was incredulous. "Why is it always someone else's fault?" I demanded. "Will you just shut up?" I was angry. I was drunk and upset that morning. I had only been with her twice. "I'll be good," I said, mimicking Tom's voice. "God, I missed your back so much." Georgia was shocked. She remembered when I had moved in. I had told her about the security system and cameras were in place, but you stated that you did not utilize them. I asserted that I did not, yet they remained operational. They verified that you were a dishonest individual. I responded by stating that she was weeping and leaning against the wall, appearing pitiful. I chose not to inform the sergeant about her perjury until I understood her motivation. I assisted her to the kitchen table, grabbed 2 beers, and sat across from her. "We are done," I stated. She nodded, and the police inquired if I wished to charge her with perjury. I had until 6 o'clock to make a decision. The time was 12 a.m. You have half an hour to answer my questions truthfully, and I will inform the authorities that you have cooperated. Please, Adam, do not withhold information. Do you have any further questions, or should I wait for the police? I will answer your questions, but please do not involve the police. Did you engage in sexual intercourse with your employer? Yes. Her tears indicated that she had been crying for approximately 9 months. She then stated that I had only been there for 10. I was taken aback by this information and exclaimed I was recruited for a new strike team. I then asked her why she had tolerated such a situation. "You are the youngest to receive $1 million bonus." I was on my 3rd job in 2 years, attempting to establish myself professionally. I suggested that while entertaining your boss might garner attention, it would not be in a positive manner. She countered that I was bragging about being a corporate prostitute, which would ultimately result in her being discarded. To commence her career as a professional sex worker, she responded, I shot back. Jeremy wanted backup, so I surreptitiously recorded some meetings. I retained copies to protect my own interests. She revealed intriguing information. If I could obtain a copy of one with you and Mr. Turnbull, I might be able to take him down. Where are the copies? I inquired, hoping they were not at work on my desk. I'll tell you what, she said, slamming the beer bottle down. Crap. Georgia appeared startled. I require a copy that includes both you and Mr. Turnbull. I proceeded to the window. How did you ascertain this information? She inquired. It is evident that you utilize your resources to procure new customers. Our financial institution is a new customer. I countered, if you are so eager to obtain a copy, I will endeavor to create one. Georgia interjected, I'm going to AB. She then proceeded to knock over her chair and grab her keys. I called after her, you're not going through the front door. She then stopped and turned to face me. What do you mean? She asked. I informed her that her boss would be covering his tracks. You'll be met by a guard with a box of your stuff, I explained. They won't let you near the computer. She appeared to be in doubt, so I elaborated further. They won't let you near the computer, I repeated. They'll have a guard with a box of your stuff waiting for you. She bit her lip in contemplation, then tossed her keys on the desk. She then walked back and disappeared into the office. Upon entering the office, I observed Georgia seated in my chair, attempting to access my computer. She informed me that she could remotely access my computer. I then observed her repeatedly entering the access code, her shoulders slumping as she became aware that she was locked out. She then slumped back in her chair and sat up with renewed energy, stating that there was a back door to Jeremy's computer. I then confirmed that I was able to access Jeremy's computer. I then proceeded to copy everything I had said. I needed leverage for a severance package. Furthermore, I was interested in causing my boss as much inconvenience as possible. I subsequently exited the office and, approximately 20 minutes later, Georgia emerged, grinning and holding a portable hard drive. She proceeded to retrieve the information I had requested, including copies of his emails. I then inquired as to whether she had obtained any other pertinent data. She confirmed that she had, but then raised her hand. I then informed her that I had already observed her in action for a sufficient length of time and that I had no further interest in doing so. She sought to gain my assistance in the event that the bank initiated legal proceedings against her. However, she also expressed a desire to attempt a reconciliation. She proposed that they resume their relationship, sell their assets, relocate abroad, and begin anew. Georgia's actions, particularly her interactions with Tom and Carl, had previously been a source of contention. However, her involvement with Jeff had reached a point where she required assistance. I informed her that I would not be remaining in the situation. She became visibly distressed and I removed the hard drive from her possession and proceeded to enter the office. Georgia subsequently entered the room. The bedroom door was forcefully closed. The hard drive was more valuable than I had anticipated. Jeremy and Mr. Turnbull were long-standing acquaintances who had collaborated to defraud the bank. Turnbull sought to enhance his pension, and thus, he enlisted Jeremy to inflate the PR contract tender. They divided the profits equally, 50-50. I contacted Sergeant Potts, who responded promptly. "I assumed you had forgotten," Sergeant Potts said. "I checked my watch and saw that it was 6, the time is 5:05 p.m. No, I simply wish to be certain." "What is the matter?" he inquired, yawning. "Do not confront her. She will be uneasy without it." "Do you know anyone in the fraud squad?" she asked. "Perhaps," he replied, his tone cautious. "I will explain later." "Oh dear," he grinned. "Who is the target this time?" "Wait and see," I replied, not wanting to reveal too much. "Oh dear," he repeated, grinning. "Who is the target this time?" "Wait and see," I repeated, not wanting to reveal too much. "Oh dear," he repeated, grinning. "Who is the target this time?" "Wait and see," I replied, not wanting to reveal too much. "Oh dear," he repeated, grinning. "Who is the target this time?" "Wait and see," I replied, not wanting to reveal too much. "Oh dear," he repeated, grinning. "Who is to pick her up?" I desired to sleep in my own bed. I then downloaded the session with Jeff and Georgia and sent it to Penny, his fiancée. It was challenging to identify the source, but it was essential. Jack arrived approximately 40 minutes later. It took some time, but eventually Georgia emerged. I gathered her clothes and they departed. My phone rang. It was Eric from the newspaper. "Did you?" In response to my column today, he inquired enthusiastically, "Yes," to which I replied in a detached manner. "Did we waver in our convictions?" he pressed. I was motivated to retaliate against them, but I had also heard the perspectives of others. I reflected on the experiences of Jack and Janice, recognizing that there are often unintended consequences in conflict. "Who should I target next?" Eric asked. I considered for a moment before responding. "Are you still there, Eric?" He confirmed that he was. Eric was visibly frustrated. He asserted that 3 bankers caught with a joint was not a significant achievement. He elaborated that the bankers in question were not merely users but had also been involved in the importation and distribution of the substance in question. Eric then inquired as to whether I had any further information. I informed him that I would keep him apprised of any developments. I then terminated the call, disconnected the landline, and closed the blinds in preparation for sleep at 9 p.m. On the following morning at 30 minutes past midnight, I was roused from my slumbers by the sound of knocking at my door. It was Greg, the building caretaker, and Adam, who had been trying to contact me. "What is the problem with your telephone?" I inquired. "I have been attempting to call you," Greg replied. "I turned them off to obtain some sleep," I explained. "What is the matter?" she asked, somewhat irritated. The DNA guys have been waiting for you downstairs for an hour, Adams said, stepping back to reveal a security guard with a box and a man in a suit holding a document. I am from the bank's legal department, I replied. I am here to discuss your contract. The termination was carried out in accordance with Section 112B due to the damage caused to the bank's reputation. A severance check for 2 weeks' remuneration was provided, and James was in possession of your personal items. He handed me the check and the guard placed a box on the floor. I was momentarily stunned. They were already halfway to the elevator when I came to my senses. 3 weeks ago, I had signed a new contract which guaranteed me a 9-month salary plus 50% of my last bonus. I loudly proclaimed that I was unaware of this. If you wish to contest it, I advised you to seek legal counsel. I followed the guard to the elevator, and the building manager trailed behind. I was dismayed to discover that the contents of my desk and a few photographs had been removed from the premises. I was determined to pursue this matter further. I contacted the lawyer who had recently reviewed my contract. I informed him that my new contract was to take immediate effect and inquired as to whether the remuneration had been deposited in my account. He replied that this was the reason for their strenuous efforts. I surmised that their intention was to force me out. To what end do you wish to proceed? I am prepared to commence litigation and, if necessary, to convene a preliminary AR hearing by the end of the month. Might I inquire as to whether there is any possibility of discussing the matter with my superior before then? I am in possession of information that could potentially persuade him to reconsider his position. Is this information of a confidential nature? He inquired as to whether there were any items missing from my office. I replied in the negative. However, I do possess a set of golf clubs in the storage room adjacent to the executive dining room. I proceeded to provide an estimate of their value. He inquired as to the cost. I informed him that they were worth approximately $20. I stated that such a claim was absurd. He then inquired as to whether the clubs were gold-plated. I replied that while they did not have the precious metal on the exterior, they did have gold inlays. He then asked about the value of the set, noting that a half set would cost approximately $50,000. I then asked the lawyer to draft an order for access, requesting that he be prepared by 1 o'clock. I am unsure. I have other tasks to complete. I informed him that I would meet him outside with the order and that I would then provide him with the golf clubs. I then proceeded to eat breakfast and head to the office for the afternoon meeting. Mr. Turnbull was typically present in the executive dining room between 12:30 and 1:30 p.m. The noise outside would serve to attract his attention. I consulted the Herald website to ascertain what Eric had written. He made a jest about high-flying bankers and mentioned the cancellation of an engagement involving $1 billion, but made no mention of Penny and Jeff. I was curious as to the source of this information. The hour of 12 o'clock came quickly, and I waited on the plaza in front of the bank building. The lawyer was 5 minutes late and approached me, pulling out a document from his pocket and waving it like a trophy. I had to wait for the magistrate to finish his morning session to sign this document, but it was finally ready. I asked what it authorized me to do as we headed for the front. I had hoped for general admission, but the individual in charge was uncooperative and only permitted entry for the purpose of retrieving one's golf clubs. I inquired as to whether that was the extent of the necessary authorization. We had already reached the front entrance, where the security personnel, who had earlier returned my office contents, were now positioned to prevent further access. He said, standing in front of me and gesturing for the other 2 guards to assist him. I held the legal document in front of his face and stated firmly, "This is a court order authorizing me access to the building. Please move out of the way." I attempted to walk past, but he blocked my path. I informed him that I had to check this first and took the order. I spoke into a microphone. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened and the same individual who had spoken with me earlier that morning emerged. He retrieved the court order from the guard, donned his reading glasses, and swiftly perused it. It was evident that he had been occupied with other matters. He then stated, "This only authorizes you to proceed to the storeroom and back." He then proceeded to implement a series of detours. Upon returning the order to me, he then directed the guard to the executive storage room. After completing this task, he returned to the elevator. I proceeded towards the elevators on the left, firmly grasping the guard by the shoulder in the storeroom. I then retrieved my clubs and proceeded into the hallway. I was determined to create a disturbance. Some individual had stolen my putter. I dropped my clubs and proceeded down the hallway in the direction of the executive dining room. The guard attempted to detain me, but I evaded his grasp. I entered the dining room, but the guard was more agile than I had anticipated. He apprehended me just as I was reaching the doorway. I attempted to liberate myself, but he was more powerful. The guard's appearance in the doorway prompted Mr. Turnbull to inquire about the source of the noise. Upon recognizing the individual, he demanded to know why he was there. The guard then informed Mr. Turnbull that he had a court order and proceeded to lift me off the floor by my collar. I ceased resisting as my target was in close proximity. "It's good to see you too," I said. I sarcastically suggested that he might want to reconsider my severance package. "No way," he said, pointing at the guard. "Get that lowlife out of here now." The dining room, the guard began to physically restrain me and proceed down the hallway. I was given a deadline of 24 hours and I believe I was provided with the guard's contact information. I verbally expressed my displeasure as the guard continued to restrain me until we reached the front yard. I referred to the guard as a parasite in a low voice. The guard then released me and I was able to retrieve my clubs. I was satisfied with the outcome of the agreement I had signed 3 weeks prior. I was able to purchase another set of clubs. However, I was somewhat concerned when I did not receive any communication before going to bed at 11 p.m. At 30 minutes past the hour, my mobile telephone emitted a sound indicative of a new message. The text message read, "Meet at Centennial Park Coffee Shop at 6:45. The time was 10 a.m. The following morning, I proceeded to the park at 6:30. I was optimistic that I would arrive first. However, it became evident that Mr. Turnbull had the same objective. As I proceeded on one side, he followed on the other. We huddled together, maintaining a distance of approximately 3 meters. He inquired about the compensation for the tape. I responded in a similarly assertive manner, stating that the contract would not commence until Thursday. He retorted that the contract was not a topic for discussion. "That is a disputed fact, and I do not have the time to navigate our court system." "I never took you for a blackmailer," he retorted. "I never took you for a man who entertains his employees' fiancées," I replied. We stood there, glaring at each other, until Mr. Turnbull backed off. "Okay, but I need the photos and any copies you have." "Have he conceded?" "You will receive the photos when I have a signed document from the bank confirming my eligibility." I stated, "You will receive them today." He replied, turning to leave, and then added, "One more thing. I want the legal counsel you sent yesterday to bring the documents." I replied, this was going to be interesting. He then asked, "Is there anything else?" To which I replied, "No, that is all." I stated, smiling. He stepped back a little and then came back closer. "You'll never work in this town, or even this country, again." "That's a risk I'm willing to take," I replied calmly, watching him walk away. "Nice doing business with you," I said with a laugh as he walked away. I still had the emails. In the interim, I was in communication with both Turnbull and Jeremy. I informed them that I would turn the documents over to the fraud squad as soon as the money arrived in my bank account. The following days proceeded relatively smoothly. The next morning, a legal representative from the bank arrived at my residence with the requisite forms for my signature. He left me a copy and informed me that the funds would be disbursed on Thursday. I provided him with an envelope containing a flash drive and a small portable hard drive, after which he departed, visibly disconcerted. On Thursday morning, Jack and Doris arrived to collect the remaining belongings of Georgia. They had a dispute with her, as she had consumed alcohol and proceeded to her boss's residence with the intention of causing a commotion in front of his wife. The police where she was advised to return home, but was subsequently apprehended for driving under the influence. She was released on bail, but the prosecutor was adamant in pursuing the case. He appeared on corporate morning to avoid jeopardizing the cases, but the conclusion was evident, particularly when the hourly news showed the 3 men were observed departing the courtroom in a manner that appeared to indicate a desire to avoid observation. It was as though Jeff had ceased to exist. I spoke with Eric, who informed me that there was a rumor that he had been sent to a remote location in South America by Penny's mother. The company was engaged in mineral exploration activities in the region, and the local population was not pleased about it. On Thursday afternoon at 4, the numerical value of the digit 5 is 55. At 4:59 p.m. on Thursday, my bank account was found to contain the sum of $720,000. The following morning, I was contacted by Sergeant Potts, 2 detectives from the fraud squad, and an individual from the Investment Securities Division. I presented them with the relevant emails, which they analyzed and subsequently determined to be indicative of a conspiracy to commit fraud. A crucial inquiry was made: how did you obtain these emails? It was conceded that they were not acquired through legal means. The detectives were visibly irritated, as they perceived that their efforts had been futile. It was acknowledged that these prominent figures were engaged in fraudulent activities, yet they were shielded by substantial legal protections. It was evident that the securities agent the atmosphere was more relaxed. Please, gentlemen, let us treat these letters as mere pointers on where to look. It will undoubtedly take some time, but there will undoubtedly be a paper trail. It would be best for us to collectively forget that we have even seen this correspondence. I do not want to jeopardize any convictions. They left, and I was alone. Mr. Turnbull seemed to have started a rumor about me. I contacted competing banks with job offers, but the HR people would not return my calls. I was walking down the street outside my building, wondering what to do, when a black car pulled up to the curb next to me. The window rolled down, and in the back seat was Penny Rainhill. She looked as lost as I felt. Despite having received job offers from several financial institutions, I was unable to establish communication with the relevant human resources personnel. As I was contemplating my next steps, a black vehicle pulled up to the curb adjacent to me. The window rolled down, and I was surprised to see Penny Rainhill seated in the back seat. She seemed to empathize with my situation, and a smile appeared on her face. I replenished the company jet and await your arrival on the tarmac. Do you prefer to recuperate, dwell on your circumstances, or embark on a vacation? I deliberated, rubbing my chin. Allow me 5 minutes to pack a suitcase. I am inclined to simply accept your invitation and join you, as our destination requires minimal attire. The wind and opening the car door to a family compound in Myas revealed a striking contrast. It has its own beach, pool, and golf course. Chef Lewinton exited the vehicle, and I immediately expressed my admiration. I tapped on the glass separating the front and back seats to signal the driver to proceed to the airport. 25 minutes later, we were seated in the Rainhill family's Gulfstream airplane and on our way. The journey would span 3 weeks. The period of time spent on vacation was extended to 5 months. I had the opportunity to engage in a romantic relationship with Penny and also interact with the flight attendant and maid. When Penny was in a playful mood, she was quite unrestrained. It was an impressive sight, but that is a topic for another discussion. The reason I returned to this location is because I wanted to be present during the proceedings of Mr. Turnbull's trial for fraud and racketeering. At the commencement of the hearing, Mr. Turnbull entered the room with a demeanor that was both relaxed and composed. He was accompanied by a team of lawyers from the bank, which had provided him with a substantial support structure, including an assistant barrister, 2 assistants, and a solicitor. By the conclusion of the first day, however, his tie was loosened, and beads of sweat had formed on his forehead as he spoke with evident distress to his solicitor. The case was not going as he had anticipated. The proceedings were proceeding in a satisfactory manner. The prosecution was meticulous in its presentation, offering a lengthy and intricate paper trail that connected Mr. Turnbull to Jeremy and the PR deal. Ultimately, it came to light that Jeremy had surrendered himself the day prior, admitting culpability but seeking to plead guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for testifying against his co-conspirators. The conspirators, aware of the inevitable outcome, prompted the bank to withdraw its support on the second day. Mr. Turnbull arrived at the hearing in a despondent state, accompanied only by a briefing lawyer, one of the bank's legal department representatives. The representative made a statement to the court indicating that the bank was no longer providing legal assistance to Mr. Turnbull and intended to take civil action against him to recover some funds, with no serious expressions remaining in the room. The prosecution concluded the case expeditiously when it was the defense's turn, exhibiting a sense of urgency by presenting a hard drive containing photographs of Mr. Turnbull, Jeremy, and George. They asserted that Jeremy had subsequently, he was compelled to participate in the conspiracy following the surreptitious recording of his conversation with Georgia. The press hastened to the courtroom, equipped with smartphones to disseminate the sensational information. This resulted in Georgia's indictment, and she was summoned to appear before the court. Jeremy was also required to return to the dock, where the entire proceedings were conducted in the presence of the press. For approximately a week, the case was the primary focus of newspapers and television broadcasts. Mr. Turnbull's defense was at its strongest until the prosecutor called Tom and Carl to the stand. They explained that Mr. Turnbull's enthusiasm for his former high school friends preceded the video. The defendants attempted to discredit them because they were serving a 4-year prison sentence. Despite the defendants' initial expectation of a year's imprisonment, the judge ultimately deemed the case worthy of further proceedings. Consequently, the case proceeded to trial. Following this, the defendant changed his plea to guilty and was sentenced to 2.5 years imprisonment. While it would be easy to speculate that the defendant was left impoverished and isolated as a result, it is likely that he was able to retain some financial stability due to his sophistication in navigating the legal system. It is plausible that he received information that the Securities and Exchange Commission was investigating him, prompting him to transfer most of his assets into his wife's name. By the time of the trial, he was allegedly residing in his son's garage and had been declared bankrupt with no assets. It is likely that he will reconcile with his wife upon release and resume his life on the streets. The Attorney General must have Mr. Turnbull, who had previously been reticent, pleaded guilty. In response, Jeremy was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud in Georgia. However, the prosecutor added several additional charges, including the use of a surveillance device to record private acts without consent, filming obscene acts, and using a telecommunications network to facilitate the offense. Extortion using threats was also included. Some of these offenses were classified as misdemeanors, but the cumulative effect of these actions resulted in a 3-year incarceration sentence. Georgia was granted probation for recording without consent and filming obscene acts. However, her reputation was adversely affected due to multiple media appearances during the trial. Despite my supporting role in the case, I was subjected to speculation regarding my involvement. I was portrayed as an unstable and betrayed man in the financial sector. Consequently, my job prospects remained unchanged. In order to overcome this challenge, I had to take the initiative to create my own employment opportunities. This led to the establishment of a venture capital business. Specifically, I have been engaged in the field of environmental projects. While I have not amassed a considerable fortune, I have managed to maintain a satisfactory standard of living. I am optimistic that I will be able to achieve positive outcomes in the future. Despite the fact that I remained close to Penny, she was a highly active participant in the social scene, whereas I was not. I am currently seeking romantic relationships, however, I have trust issues that are impeding my ability to do so. I have recently initiated a wetland restoration project. Approximately 700 kilometers west of Sydney, in the remote outback region, 2 mining companies and a financial institution have collectively invested in initiatives aimed at enhancing their corporate image. I am optimistic that residing in an historic homestead, which was once the primary residence for a vast sheep ranch spanning 1,000 acres along the Darling River, will bring positive changes. I hope that the pristine natural environment, with its clean air and expansive skies, will bring about a favorable shift in my fortunes.